And guys, it's Tim O'Connor once again popping off about politics. I am a New York State Senate candidate for District 51, the heart, the agricultural breadbasket, the Rust Belt of upstate New York. And with me tonight, Shane Hazel. And this is one of the things I love about the Libertarian Party, guys. I can meet a U.S. Senate candidate. He will give me some time and he will help me sell liberty to you. And that's what we're here to do. All right. So, Shane, we got a couple guys already, so that's good. So one of the things I want to talk about is what was your reason to decide to run for Senate? I'll go into my reasons because I'm half crazy, but you're definitely not. So
oh, man, I'm so down the road of crazy. It's ridiculous. Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I ran for a U.S. House down here in Georgia, and we made a pretty good impact, especially for a first timer going out and running. This time, the Libertarians came around and started talking to me about, hey, man, you're a lot more Libertarian than you are Republican. Why are you beating your head against the wall over there in the Republican Party? We love you. We love what you stand for. Come down, talk to us. And so I went down, talked to them. First one's free, like, the whole drug thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely, right? They gave you a hook.
Yeah, so I met a lot of great libertarians, and they're like, "Yeah, man, you need to come over here." And so it was somewhere, I think, around the end of last year, maybe a little bit earlier, sometime where I had just had it. The Republicans went out and made asses of themselves again. There was, to have seen everything up close and personal in my last run, as a veteran, as a hometown boy, like all those things that, and a constitutional, like a constitutional scholar, like I was out teaching the Constitution, and Republicans hated me, absolutely hated me. And so I was just one of those things where I went down and we had a convention, and they were like, hey, we're going to nominate Shane as our U.S. Senate candidate. And, you go to the convention and you stand up there with the other people that are, that want to run, and you beat them and you beat NOTA, and here you are running for U.S. Senate. So, what else can I say?
So you're saying there's an actual party organization for libertarians down in Georgia. I mean, we're working on that in New York State, but tell us, you got a lot of people that actually just kind of stepped up and kind of recruited you, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so we, at our convention, we probably had about 200, 250 on a big day, and hats off to Ryan Graham. Ryan Graham is the party chair down here, and I hope he'll continue to want that position, because he does a stellar job in terms of getting people excited, getting people involved, going out and recruiting and making things happen like this, and that's the thing, is like, there's a lot of excitement down here. We've got, like, I don't know, the last GOP poll, we got 7% of the vote. I haven't spent a dime in this whole thing. So it's, you're already affecting, the race in a very big way, because here in Georgia, you have to have a plurality. You got to have, I think it's 50.1 or 51%, off the top of my head. But if the Republican or the Democrat doesn't get that, we're going to a runoff down here, one way or the other. And so this has the power to make national news, as, when we saw the Libertarian run in Kentucky for governor this past time around, right? Like, they sent it in and the Democrat ended up winning. Like, the Libertarians are sending a message to especially the Republicans now that, hey, we're done playing ball. We're done giving you our votes. We're done with this whole thing. And you guys are going to get clobbered at the polls, especially down here in Georgia.
Yeah. So let's like expand on that for a second. We're talking about, I think there's ways for us to reach Democrats too. And one of the things I like about the Libertarian Party, being that I was a small government conservative who didn't worry about religion, didn't worry about marriage issues, didn't worry about these other things. So how do we reach Democrats? Because I think that we can't just beat up on the Republicans, because number one, some of my Republican friends are looking at the Libertarian Party and going, they're giving it the eye like this. Hey, that looks okay to me, So let me get some Democrats in here.
Well, and let's do both, right? Because, and I talk about this all the time on my podcast, Radical. It is, hey, if you're a recovering Republican or a recovering Democrat, welcome. We don't expect you to fit right in at first. It's not how it's going to work. It's going to be tough for you. It's going to be one of those things where you're welcome, But listen, one of those things where you come in and you want to listen and you want to talk. We're not going to call each other names. We're not going to sit there and say, he said, she said. We're not going to go back to, the Supreme Court opinions. What we're going to do is we're going to hammer down to principle first and foremost. And so for Democrats out there, one of the easiest things to sell to the whole Democrat crowd is you want to talk about criminal justice reform and what's going on in the streets right now, ending the war on drugs, getting rid of qualified immunity, getting rid of civil asset forfeiture. Those three things alone for Democrats, the party that's supposed to be for the little guy, that's supposed to be for your right to do with your body what you want to do, to not be accosted by, the state with guys with little shiny badges on as they walk down the street. Like that, your person, your property, your effects, all of those things belong to you all of the time. And unless somebody has some type of articulable suspicion of a real crime, right? And I say real crime, defining crime as murder, rape, assault, coercion, property damage, robbery, things that are real crimes. Like if it's not one of those things, leave people the hell alone.
Yeah, so my buddy Jeff's got a question for you. Is there such a thing as a moderate Democrat anymore?
I think there are.
Fair question, right? I don't know. Man.
And I think the further south you come down here, a lot of people down here are, what we call blue dog Democrats, right? Like they're old holdovers. Once segregation and all that kind of stuff went by the wayside down here, a lot of Democrats became Republicans because they knew they couldn't win under the Democratic ticket anymore. And so, a lot of them, fleeced out there, and now you're looking at another generation. So those people had kids, and those people still came up in kind of this, I don't know, Democratic household for a lot of people. And it is, this idea that you still own your land, you still own your property. We should be a lot more classically liberal in terms of the sense of, right? Like that's a bad word for some people.
Classically liberal. I love that. Keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, it's all good, man. That's just the way. It's real simple, and to sell freedom, right? And it's the thing. We don't want your money. We don't want we don't want your money. We want the state to have less power. And in a day and age when you look at what's going on in the world right now, I just read a story before coming on here where some person got their ass beat for not wearing a mask in public by a sheriff's deputy, right? Like if you're a Democrat out there and you think the state is hurting people, that they are abusing people, that they're brutalizing and killing too many people, the Libertarian Party is your best friend in terms of reforming, getting rid of all of these things that kind of gum up the gears of criminal justice and all of that. It's like, hey, man, we believe in all of your rights all the time for absolutely everybody.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that confuses me about, I would call them my Democrat friends, right? They're like advocating for policies that grow the state, that literally grow bureaucracies, and top-down economics is something that I go off about whenever I'm talking about politics. And Democrats are advocating for this top-down economic organization where we beg the next level for money all the time. And so when I look at that and when I see them abridging our property rights and wondering why there's no one here, and they're trying to give away housing and stuff like that, and then they're basically crapping on people who would provide housing by making the laws just too difficult to circumvent or work their way through, they create exactly what they stand against. And so, and again, I don't want to just crap on Democrats, man. It's something that I want them to understand. I want them to hear what I'm saying, because I love everybody, but they sometimes use the government to create exactly what they say they don't want. Does that make sense to you, brother?
It makes perfect sense. And that's the thing, is you look at most major urban areas since the 1960s. Most major urban areas have been absolutely controlled at every level by Democrats. And that speaks to something. You look at, who their presidential nominee is right now. The presidential nominee is going to be Joe Biden, the author of the 1994 Crime Act, right? Like, the no kidding, this act was one of the things that ramped up the private prison complex out there that threw more people in jail for what I call fantasy crime, right? Like if it's not murder, rape, assault, kidnapping, coercion, robbery, and any type of vandalism, like that's fantasy crime. Non-violent crime out there for people with badges to enforce is ridiculous. And that's exactly what the 1994 crime bill did. It's exactly what people like Kamala Harris and AG in California upheld, and threw tons and tons of people who are melanated beings behind bars. And you're like, guys, you're supposed to be Democrats. You're supposed to be the classically liberal people, and you want to criminalize everything out there. And on the other hand, and let's not leave Republicans out of this.
Yeah, let's criticize everyone. I love it. Bring it.
I say this with love in my heart. I love you guys. You're my countrymen, and I want you to hear this. The same thing with Democrats and Republicans out there is you will have both of them and the legislators say, we need to pass this piece of legislation for your safety. Democrats will say it's guns. Republicans will say it's drugs. Both of them you're never going to take out of society, ever, 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 ever. And both are nonviolent. One is your right to your person and your property and your effects, right? Like all those things apply. And, as much as a liberal will say, hey, we need to get the guns out of their hands, which we're seeing an end to that debate now with places like Chaz and CHOP. You've got people who are anti-gunners out there manning posts with guns. And then obviously the right is coming around with cannabis too, right? Like in a lot of states, we're making some progress. We're starting to get into that critical mass point where, hey, man, it's a plant. It's just like tomatoes. It grows in a yard. If you want to use it, if you want to grow it, it should be absolutely within your domain as a natural being harvesting a natural plant.
Yeah. So whenever I talk about marijuana, I got to apologize to my mom because she's not excited about me going, yeah, legalize weed. Let's make this happen. Let's put everybody, But when we're looking at upstate New York and when we're looking at New York, period, it's getting legalized. Bottom line, okay? Yeah. This is coming down the stream. The reason why it's not legalized yet is they haven't figured out the way to tax it appropriately. And guys, I play the fixed game scenario. They haven't figured out a way to enrich their buddies with it. Okay, so now they're kind of putting those laws together. So next year or whatever, they're going to budget reconcile it. It's going to be legal. And Cuomo's 10 best friends are going to have all the licenses to distribute it in New York State. So
that's exactly right.
Legalized in such a way that benefits our communities, that benefits our small farmers. And we have hundreds of small farmers. The area I'm seeking to represent, Bud, is the size of Connecticut. Okay. Wow. And yeah, it's huge. It's a whole state in and of itself. And we're primarily an agricultural thing. We have some college towns and some small, like rural communities. But what we have is a land use deficit. So I don't know what's going on down in Georgia, but up here in central New York, we have taxed our population away. We have chased them away with regulations, and they're well-intentioned. They start out well-intentioned, and then we look at it, and it's like they got this exclusionary zoning, and the exclusionary zoning ends up benefiting these big property management companies in college towns, and you're just like, guys, you got to help us figure this out. We've got to move forward. So we're like, localize it, bring it back to our towns, even pay our town board guys more money. These guys are doing this act of love for $1,000 a year, $2,000 a year.
Yeah.
Is it like that down where you are?
Yeah. What's funny is the House just down here, or I should say the Georgia Assembly, just basically sold out Georgians, right? Last year or so, I think it was the first time we had passed even somewhat of the step forward in terms of legalizing the growing and harvesting of cannabis out there. And it was something like $25,000 for a license, and there was only going to be a few of those. And now what they've done this year is they've jacked that up to $50,000. And you're sitting there going like, hey, man, this isn't for the average farmer. This isn't for your average person out there. This is who's close to the power. This is, the good old boy system at work. And you're exactly right. It's, how are we going to, as the government, how are they going to tax it? How are they going to take advantage of it? How are they going to control you? And that's the problem. So the solution, let's talk about solutions for a second with this one.
Brother.
So Solution for most of what pains your community, your county, your parish, your whatever you live in. The local sheriff is an elected official. He is the highest executive in your area, which means that he, per Article 6, Section 3 of the Constitution, swears an oath to uphold the Constitution. And per Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution, that is the supreme law of the land. And all law that is not pursuant to the Constitution is not withstanding. It is extremely clear what law is and what law isn't. So let's jump back in the Wayback Machine in our little DeLorean and go back in history to the 1918, somewhere where they outlaw alcohol, right?
Right.
In the Constitution, those guys went through the Article 5 amendment process to the Constitution. It's the only legal way to amend the Constitution. They went out and they said, hey, listen, Joe and Jane, you're no longer making spirits for people out there. We think this is reprehensible, and it is now a prohibited transaction, a prohibited manufacturing process. Like, this is done, right? They passed an amendment for this. Now, this fails. Cops are getting shot all over the place. You get NASCAR out of this whole thing. You've got, I mean, there is a black market industry that's absolutely kicking ass during this time with all sorts of machine guns and all that kind of stuff. And they are kicking the government's ass right down the road, saying, screw you. You're not going to terrorize us. We're going to beat the shit out of you guys. And I'm sorry can I cuss on your show?
I do. So
okay, perfect.
And I don't get a lot of complaints. I mean, we get through it every time, man. We're
real people. We'll keep
sharing our love for our community and history, right? So
we'll keep it PG-13, right?
Yeah,
So
work.
yeah. So the death of police officers goes up. The death of citizens goes up. You create this small proxy war, especially in places like Kentucky, Tennessee, North Georgia, Virginia, Southern Ohio, and places like that. And then all of a sudden, people have had enough. People are saying enough, enough, enough. They pass another amendment to the Constitution per the Article 5 process. So now you've got two Article 5 amendments inside of the Constitution prohibiting and then outlawing prohibition. Once again, they never, ever, ever did that with cannabis. Ever.
No, they didn't, man.
No. So your answer to this is you look at that sheriff, and if this guy won't play ball and you say, hey, man, cannabis in our county should not only be legal, it should probably be encouraged that not only do you own your own land, you have the right to grow anything on your land that you want to grow, and you have the right to transact through,
the free market, brother.
With a free market, with anybody that will buy your flowers, man. And then that's liberty, man. Like, that's the thing is, like, it's so simple.
And Mom, I'm sorry, but I agree with him. Okay, that's the way it's going to work. So look, we even have hemp regulated here. Like, you got to pay the sheriff $500. It's, again, this top down here. We all got to know exactly what everybody's doing. You got to tell us how many plants you're planting and what section of your farm it's going to be on.
Yeah.
We'll send a sheriff by, especially during harvest season, to keep an eye on it for you, which in a way is a decent service, but don't get me wrong. Why is it got to cost money? These guys are already paying property taxes. If we want to help them protect their property, which may be a valid function of your sheriff's department, I don't know. I think most people would keep their eye on their own hemp. And for the most part, if it's a hemp field, who's going to be crazy enough to get in there?
Well, it's also a jobs program, man.
Yeah.
You got to look at it that way, right? Like, if you look at this as a jobs program, right, where now you're creating a security industry for your cannabis, for the production, for the distribution, like, all of that's jobs. That's why places like Colorado, I think they rolled over $1 billion in just tax, right? Just tax revenue.
Yeah.
Not to mention that, in terms of an industry, I don't know exactly what the number was. I want to say it was something like in the double digits, around 14. But don't quote me. But at the same time, like, that's what you have to look at.
Shane, I fly off the handle with numbers all the time. Don't even worry about it, man. I make them right up out of the seat of my pants. It's fine. As long as you get close, we're going to be fine. So
that's right. So and let's talk about a couple other aspects of the whole cannabis thing too, because as a Marine combat vet, having seen a whole bunch of stuff up close and personal, I went out to Colorado. This is a long time ago. This is probably not long after Prohibition ended out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And me and my buddy, we went down to a local dispensary. It was easy to go in. You give them your ID. You walk in, you get a bud tender, and they sit there and they tell you about all the stuff that they have, whether it's flour and tea or edibles, whether it's gummies or brownies or whatever the heck you want to ingest, or smoke for that matter. I mean, like, they've got it all. They've got everything that you need. They can tell you about it. They can tell you, hey, if you're looking for this or you're looking for that, like, they can recommend things. They can tell you about amounts. They have measured it. They've studied it. For medicinal purposes, you're in this line over here. And for recreational purposes, you're in this line over here. So I can tell you from, personal experience as a vet, I had this really high op tempo. I was part of Force Reconnaissance in the Marine Corps. And for those of you guys that don't understand, like, that was at the time the premier special operations, First Force Reconnaissance was the premier special operations, company inside the Marine Corps at the time. And so, having done a couple of deployments with those guys, you get to this state where you're fun to be with. Like, you can make jokes about anything, right? Because you've seen the worst. And that's just what the human body and the human mind does. It takes these things and it makes things light, right? We have to joke about these things. We have to talk about these things. We have to, at least be around each other and do, what we have to do to mentally deal with this at the time. Now, transfer 5, 10, 15 years down the road for the average vet that's coming off of the battlefield out there, and I'm not talking about a fobbit, somebody that sits behind the wire and never ever leaves. I'm talking about guys who are going out and mixing it up. These guys are mission oriented all the time. It's mission, and anything that gets in the way of that mission is looked at as a weakness, right? Like,
right.
If it's a weakness, you got to get rid of that, man. And one of the things that will be a trouble to some people is empathy. The ability to empathize with your fellow man, for God's sakes. As a warrior, if you're not mission complete, you failed the mission. That's not acceptable. And now you come back into your real life where you're dealing with your wife, your kids, your in-laws, whoever it is, right? And now you're just on this mission set still. What's my mission for the day? What am I supposed to be ticking off in the to-do list today? Anything that gets in the way of that is not something that I need to be dealing with. And that is the downfall of a ton of veterans out there. What cannabis did, especially for me, and what it has done for a lot of people out there with PTSD, it has restored their ability to empathize, their ability to love and see how their fellow man and woman is living, what's affected by them, and maybe reserve some judgment. Maybe sit there and say, hey, man, maybe I need to, say something like a prayer for that guy instead of going out and in my own head even beating him up, right? Like when you have this quick fire judgment, right? Where you're like, man, that guy's fat as hell over there. And you're like, man, maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe I should pray for that dude over there and say, you know what? I hope that guy finds something in his life other than food to deal with his problems. Or, hey, I hope that person over there becomes less angry. Whatever the case is, that restores empathy. And that's the beautiful thing about cannabis, man. It is one of those things where it is less, I should say, addictive. I think there are addictive personalities out there, but in terms of side effects, I would much rather have it be socially acceptable and legal, for the most part, to sit here and light up a big fat J, and have that conversation than to pop a top on some beer. And I understand why it happens. I don't understand the hang up with all the information, especially with the internet out there these days, why cannabis is still one of those things that people frown upon.
Yeah, that's interesting. So look, I think I have empathy sometimes. I'm not sure, okay, but I've had people convince me that And again, as I've mentioned, I am pro marijuana because I'm empathetic for my community. So that sold me. Okay. Your story just now, more than anything that a doctor would ever say to me, more than anything that a marijuana expert would ever say to me, shows me that there is value, medicinal value to treating PTSD with marijuana. I got a buddy that convinced me that it is a painkiller for him, or a couple buddies actually. It's not just one guy. And like I maybe have used it once or twice in my life. I don't know. You know what I mean? But those stories right there are what makes this real. Okay. This is a direct benefit. I got a buddy, check this out, and maybe you want to run through this. If you don't, you can you can vamp to another subject. But I got a buddy, was a paratrooper, right? His kid went and served 25 years later. He served time, he did time in Iraq, and so this kid came back with PTSD, and we talked about it, and he talked about the rules of engagement that he faced and the rules of engagement that his son faced. And I'm like, I'm not a psychiatrist, man, but I'm telling you, do you want to riff on that? Like, is that a comfortable subject for you? The engagement over there can cause PTSD. That's the premise I'm starting with.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, to have seen a few of these things up close and personal that actually changed my life, that probably led me into libertarianism, right? And for those of you guys out there, man, I grew up in the South. Like, I'm from Michigan, so I'm a Midwestern boy in my heart, right? But I grew up down here in the South. The South, you know, what they preach is red, white, and blue, and it is the American flag, and it is the national anthem, and it is God bless the troops, and all that stuff. Like, it is when you sign, you know, when you sign your life away to go join the United States Marine Corps right after 9/11, it's one of those things where you're like, man, game on. I'm star spangly badass now, right? So fast forward a bit. The rules of engagement where we went in initially, the rules of engagement weren't terrible going into Iraq the first time in 2003. You know, March of 2003, we go in, we roll all the way through Iraq, Baghdad, Tikrit, and all that fun stuff. And my platoon gets sent back. Now I get back on a training schedule. We get sent back on a plane. We come back in 2004, and in August of 2004, we get wrapped up. The 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit and my platoon, second platoon, gets wrapped up in the Battle of Najaf. Now, the Battle of Najaf, it begins in August. Marines are fighting through this graveyard that's miles long. There's catacombs. It's dusty. It's hot as hell. People are getting shot and killed. Yeah. It's an awful situation. And they move these guys down to the second holiest site called the Imam Ali Shrine. And we are ready to level this place. Absolutely take it out and be done. And the Grand Ayatollah Sistani and this guy named Muqtada al-Sadr, the fat little bastard that he was, right?
I love it, brother. Yeah. All right, cool.
He's got his Mahdi militia, right? Like, and at this point in my life, I'm like, yeah, let's scrub this second holiest site right off the map. Let's drop some JDAMs and let's be done, right? We've got these guys holed up. It would have been over right then and there. Grand Ayatollah Sistani and Muqtada al-Sadr come to a peace deal with some jackass in D.C., some bureaucrat, some secretary, maybe the Department of Defense secretary at the time, you know, Rumsfeld, and they say, disengage, stand by, and watch these guys walk out under a truce. And we're sitting there going like, is this war? Are we at war? What are we doing? I thought the intent of war was to destroy the threat, right? Like, that's not what happened. And so it opened my eyes to the point where I was like, Jesus Christ, you know, what are we doing here? So that was my aha moment, right? Like, that was like, dude, America isn't what it is, and what it's saying it is, first and foremost. And these guys out here who pledged their lives to this country have just been taken advantage of for some kind of political stunt. And we don't know how this is going to wash out. Now, in terms of ROE, right? Like, when we look at the rules of engagement, which were far, far more strenuous than what you see in terms of cops engaging the public here in America these days. Okay. Had I ever done anything like what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis, or what happened down here with Rashard Brooks, boy, I would have been on CNN. I would have been on MSNBC. I would have been on Fox News. I would have been drugged in front of my superior officers. I would have been court-martialed. And then I probably would have been sent off to Leavenworth for a lot of the stuff that I did. Like that's crazy, right? Like those are their ROEs. And so when you take really, really restrictive ROEs in a time of war, and you make these guys second guess what they are doing outside the wire, which could save their buddy's life.
Yeah.
And they don't pull the trigger, and something happens where somebody, explodes a V-bed or a person-born IED or whatever the case is, where they doubted themselves, something happened, and their boys die, man. You want to talk about PTSD? Like the second guessing what you did, man, what the hell? Like that's what we're asking those guys to do overseas. We don't even ask that from our own cops here in the United States.
Yeah, I think that's where we got to with that, man. I think that's kind of the conclusion we drew. Just a couple guys hanging out, having this conversation. And brother, I want to thank you for your military service.
Oh,
is something that there was moments where I tried it, and then there was moments where I pulled back. I went to college. I thought about going during college. A couple years later, things got kind of sideways in my life. I thought about joining up again, and then I realized I had worked hard for something that was incredibly important, which was custody or shared custody of my oldest child. So that they said, we can't take you to him because your kid could show up wherever we ship you to. So I kind of just like slid out of that deal. So I, as a guy who may have tried it, want to say thank you to a guy who has done it, right? Like that's a big deal. That service is important. My buddy Andrew Hamill's got a question for you.
Sure, man.
Probably. All right. So let's check this out. And guys, listen, before we get into Andrew's answer, the likes, the shares, the comments, guys, let's keep them coming. Let's keep talking about it. This is, maybe once in an election cycle to get Shane on here. He's going to be a busy man. He's going to win an election. So check out what Andrew's got to say here. All right.
So how can we get a third-party candidate like Libertarians, Green Party, etc., on the debate stage to debate Democrats and Republicans? You're going to have to work your ass off. That's the bottom line. There's got to be a loud voice. There's got to be some outrage. Let me tell you something. Liberty ain't free. They talk about it, being overseas somewhere where we're fighting this imaginary enemy. Trust me, the enemy is here. It is within. It is the RNC. It is the GOP. They have it's a duopoly, right? Where the DNC is always pushing, always pushing for communism, socialism light, right? Like that's their thing. Republicans are just controlled opposition at this point. And that controlled opposition is just like, So really, what does it mean to be a conservative in this day and age? It means you're 10 years behind where the Democrats were, 10 years ago.
Right.
So the act of being free men and women, you will have to fight right now for, while it's peaceful, you will have to fight. You will have to work. You will have to donate your time. You will have to donate your effort. You will have to donate your resources. When you look at the Declaration of Independence, the last paragraph is a prayer, right? And when they sign it, when they sign off, they say, I pledge to you my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. That's what being free takes. And so if you want to get people on the stage, you want to get people into debates with these people, you're going to have to go out and work, because a lot of time they're going to put up these artificial barriers. Like, first and foremost, hey, this guy hasn't raised any money. And secondly, there's nobody talking about this guy out there. If that's who you want in office, you're going to have to talk about him. You're going to have to recruit other people to talk about him. Are you good with memes? Make memes. Can you do video snippets? Can you grab a snippet, put it to some music, and make something that's compelling? What can you do? Who do you know? What kind of resources do you have? This is something you should be asking yourself on a daily basis. What am I doing for liberty today? Have I called my reps? Have I called, somebody in the party? Am I taking an active stance in supporting a candidate? I don't care if he's in your state or not. I really don't care. That is the game we're in. I'm telling you right now, for, I don't know, over 2 years now, I have produced 2 different podcasts, Radical and The Rebellion. And I've done it on my own dime. I've done an hour and a half, so probably close to 6 hours of content, just content every week. And, like you run for office, right? Like I'm running for office on my own dime. I don't ask people for money because I don't want your money. I think your money, if you got more of it, is better served in your community. Like, those are the types of things you're going to have to do. This is honestly, we're lucky it's not more of a blood sport, but it's a blood sport. You're going to have to toil. You're going to have to expend life, liberty, property to fight these guys, or we're not going to win one way or another. Or it's going to get hot again, and we're going to get into a hot match of who wants to be free or who wants our stuff, right? And we know how that ends, right? That's misery, death, and destruction. And I definitely don't want that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So hang on, let me give a shout out to David Weiss right here. David is he does a podcast. It's if I remember correctly, David, tell me, but he's out west. I'm going to be on his podcast right after this show, shortly after. So I'm keeping it busy. I'm doing what you're saying, and the bottom line is I ask for money, but it is. Let's let them keep their money. Let's see if they can help us other ways, right? If you want to share this video, if you, like you said, create a snippet of something for me, and just, there we go. Thule Happy Hour, that I knew. Utah, brother. Anyway, so that's the thing, man. You bring it in. We're bringing in community. I had a buddy reach out to me from Manhattan, Kansas. And we went to high school together, and he's like, Tim, what can I do for you? And I'm like, man, all you got to do is share this to your kid who happens to be in Atlanta, who is an anarcho-capitalist. That's it. Share it to him. He's gonna see my buddy Shane, and Shane's gonna get a couple votes off this. We're gonna convince him, and we're gonna sell liberty to this kid and these group of kids. That's one of the reasons. That's the other reason why I'm doing this, man. These kids have not heard this message their entire lives. They haven't heard about liberty. They haven't heard about smaller government. They haven't heard about the possibility that your community answers a lot of problems and a lot of things that we're begging the government for solutions to. So,
you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I'd love to, man. You pick right up wherever you want.
Let's talk about localism. I've already mentioned the sheriff. Get a sheriff. It doesn't take many people to vote in the right guy for sheriff. I don't care if you got law enforcement experience anyway. Learn the Constitution, learn what rights are, protect those rights, and stick to those things. Don't be bullied by a governor. Don't be bullied by a mayor. Don't be bullied by anybody. It's walk softly, carry a big stick kind of thing, right? There are tons of guys out there like Sheriff Mack of the constitutional sheriffs out there that can help you out and will help you out if you'll be one of those guys that will uphold the Constitution. But localism, your schools. You said that kids haven't heard about these things. I will contend that people don't hear about these things in the United States by design because we don't have a public school system. We have a prescribed government indoctrination system.
I love that word, man. Prescribed. Yeah.
And you guys, I'll tell you right now, New York State, home to John Taylor Gatto, the guy that woke me up out of my slumber, that said, the great book is called Weapons of Mass Instruction. I read it back in 2004 when I was on, a couple day reprieve in my tent during the Battle of Fallujah, right? Like right before Thanksgiving, I was like, all right, I got a book. Let me read this thing. And the government indoctrination system is set forth, obviously, by the government. There are things they want you to be able to do, and there are things that they don't want you to know. And that is the power of government owning the education system. Get the government out of education system. It is 2020. We got a golden opportunity right now to sit there and say, screw you guys. You canceled school. These 18-year-olds who are supposed to be graduating this year see this. Like, you have 18-year-olds right now that absolutely can't stand the system, that see that it's built on lies. And they're going, we're not even at risk. Why aren't we graduating? Why aren't we allowed to be around each other? Am I going to waste my time and money incurring debt in $100,000, $200,000, type organization like a university around here? No. Like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to find a skill, I'm going to try to be an entrepreneur. Government indoctrination doesn't teach anything about your rights. It doesn't teach anything about the Constitution. It doesn't teach anything about the Federalists, the anti-Federalists who had those debates in terms of coming to an agreement on, being a confederated type organization or, a constitutional republic. Like, none of those things ever happened. in school. They don't teach you about entrepreneurship. They don't teach you about tax code. They don't teach you about, federal, tax IDs. They don't want you to be that independent person that knows all this kind of stuff, because an independent person is a really, really scary individual who can lead not only organizations, but can lead armies and standing up for people's rights against the state.
Yeah. Wow. That was beautiful, man. Like, I wish I could find words like that. Right. That was great. But I have a small local story, right? A guy that I know took the U.S. Constitution, rewrote it, typed it up in this form, and he just wanted to hand it out in schools, right? Just wanted kids to have it. So we brought it to one school, brought it to another school. They're like, we can't do this. This isn't on our approved reading material. We can't just hand this to kids. You can do it on your own if you want to, but you got to find the kids when they're not here. Like,
that's right.
And man, I love that guy. He freaks out about it, but he's fighting that battle too for us. Like, he's out there in the community trying to teach kids about the Constitution. And when you read the Constitution and when you imbibe the Constitution, when you let it be part of the way you think, the individual is the ultimate sovereign over the ultimate checks and balances against big government. We've forgotten that, right? We talk about the courts are supposed to check against the executive, and the legislative is supposed to check against the courts, and ultimately the individual who doesn't have access to either one of those things at any given time is supposed to be the ultimate check and balance against all that stuff. Am I crazy? I feel crazy when I say that, but then I find guys like you who almost agree with me or put a better spin on it. What do you say?
I totally agree with you. Like I'm an anti-federalist. After reading the anti-federalists out there, I definitely side with those guys. They're prophets, and I've got, I think, the first, 22 Federalist papers that I've, not only do I read them for people, but I talk about them, right, in context. Hey, this is the words that they're using, then this is what they meant. A lot of times that's very dry reading for somebody. So if somebody in 2020 can sit there and read it and then talk about it as how it pertains to our current situation, the happenings of, domestic and foreign policy, it makes a lot more sense. Couple of things. The Constitution is a great document. It wasn't powerful enough, obviously, to keep us from sliding here, because it takes an attentive, populace to do it. And there's this old saying that, any citizenship will have the government that it deserves, right? And that's because we either know our rights or we don't know our rights. The Constitution was just, the next step in the lineage of what happened in terms of, you had the 1100 Charter of Liberties over in England. You had the Magna Carta, you had the Petition of Right, you had the Grand Remonstrance, and then you had the English Bill of Rights. And then in America, those guys say, we're done with Europe, we're done with the UK, we're coming over here, here's the Declaration of Independence. They all did the same thing, right? These were all the populace standing up and saying, enough is enough. You and you as kings, and you as the House of Lords and the House of Commons, you guys have overridden, what we've asked you to do, which was basically be a foreign emissary. That's how the King of England came to be in the first place. We want you to be a foreign emissary to deal with our foreign policy, war, peace, negotiation, foreign commerce. That's it. That's the last paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. That's why we have a federal government, is to deal with those things, so the states can monitor their own citizens. They can go in terms of trade. They can trade with each other. They can contract alliances like that's, or a contract, through trade. And then everything else out there, that's supposed to be the federal government looking outward, never inward. And yes, the Constitution is also one of those things where it's very easy to understand. A lot of people think this is, it's this great mystery. And you'll be told that by teachers and professors and news personalities and all that kind of stuff. We can't know what they really meant. What a bunch of bullshit. Like, listen, I think there's 96 or 95 Federalist papers, and there's 84 anti-federalist papers. These guys were prolific writers. They were absolutely some of the greatest writers on earth, and they debated and they wrote about it, and they juxtaposed positions between each other. Yeah. And you can sit there and say, God, like there's reams.
Yeah.
Reams and reams and reams just in the Federalist and anti-Federalist papers, not to mention the letters of correspondence that they wrote back and forth to each other. Yes, we know what they meant. The entire Constitution was a document that would never have passed had not for the anti-federalists said, listen, you will include a Bill of Rights in this constitutional republic that you're putting forth, or we're not in, we're out. And we will come to blows in terms of being your countrymen. We will not be ruled without a Bill of Rights, right? And so the first act of the Congress underneath the constitutional republic was an Article 5 amendment to adopt the first 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights. So it is not perfect, but it is one of those things that if we had a constitutional government, geez, oh Pete, man, we would be living such a different lifestyle and a better one. I mean, here you go. $26 trillion in debt. Had we spent $26 trillion in debt in the private sector, can you imagine the amazing world we'd live in?
No, brother. I think like what you're saying. First of it, we hold these truths to be self-evident. And then they backed it up with volumes of writing to communicate to us sitting here on this precipice of an absolute disaster. Okay, they did the work. And you and I are doing the work too, right? We're not writing it down, but we're sitting here, we're having this conversation. My buddy Steve is got a funny comment on that. I love it. I often suspect in education, the books, the Animal Farm in 1984 are being used as instruction manuals, right?
Damn right they are.
Got it. He's got a vibe right there. He's one of those Republicans that looking at the Libertarian Party like, that looks pretty good.
Can I say something to you guys that are Republicans out there? I was a Republican. Let me tell you something. I feel so much better over here. The first time I'd never voted for a Republican in a presidential election, 2008, when they put up John McCain, that god-awful human being, against Barack Obama. And I'll tell you right now, for the next 8 years, I couldn't stand Barack. Don't get me wrong. Like, I couldn't stand the guy. I didn't vote for Mitt Romney. I voted for Ron Paul. And I didn't feel like I ever had to defend a person. I don't think America should ever defend a politician ever. Anybody with power should be looked at as a very scrupulous individual, right? They should never, ever, ever be trusted. Not like Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. No, don't trust these guys. These are thieves and they're murderers. I mean, carte blanche. Like that's what the federal government is. They are thieves and murderers. Never trust these people. Yeah. But as a person who used to vote Republican, it is a weight off my shoulders. It is a yoke I no longer have to carry. And I sleep very well at night looking at these bastards in DC, all of them, minus a handful. And do you understand? There's a great resource for you guys out there. It's from it's the Freedom Index. The guys over at the JBS run it. It is a constitutional scoring metric. So as the senators and congressmen take votes, these guys measure them every vote against the Constitution, and they start to rate people. There are 5 out of 535 members of Congress and the Senate, right? The House of Representatives and the Senate, 5 who rate an A. Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, and a guy that Republicans always trash, Justin Amash. That guy,
we love Joe. You know, why they got to be like that with him?
He's got an A constitutional voting record. And trust me, I think he went off the rails a little bit with voting for impeachment. Trust me, I'm not that guy.
I agree with you. I don't know what that was about. Somebody alleged he had some bitterness towards Trump over some family dealings, and that was the only thing that I could bring home in my brain because it didn't make sense to me. They violated, they crapped all over the concept of what I understand to be evidence, and it was an emotional ploy. It was a taxpayer
bullshit, right?
Campaign strategy. It was bullshit. Yeah,
it is, and that's the thing is they have the Democrats have failed every time they've gone after Trump. Like, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say Trump's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Like, there are a lot of things I will not defend about Trump. He hasn't gotten us into any new wars, thank God. Right. Barack Obama did. He got us into Yemen. He got us into Syria. He got us into Libya. And here, Democrats, here's a point. Democrats, you're against slavery. When they were running guns through Libya to Syria for the quote-unquote moderate liberals who were actually the Northern Alliance, they were al-Zarqawi's lieutenants up there, the guys I chased all over Iraq trying to kill, they went out and they armed the Syrian moderate rebels per John McCain and Lindsey Graham. They armed these people via Hillary Clinton in the State Department through Libya. And now that Omar Gaddafi is gone and he was going to stand up a gold trade for Africa, the entire country has collapsed. And now they are literally to this day collectively trading slaves.
Yeah, it's still going on.
Where you at, Democrats?
Yeah, where you at with that? Dave wants to know if you're familiar with Libertarian.
Hell yeah, I tried to have that guy on my podcast. He flaked out.
Listen, Shane, I could talk to you for days, all right? But at some point, Facebook starts hating us and they start kicking people out of our lobby and whatever. And plus, I got to go. My favorite guys. I love these guys, and man, I get it, Warren and Shelley. I get it. Not voting Republican is scary. It is, because there is this concept of these people are close to us, and
I agree.
And they can be a Democrat, right? That's there. So it doesn't have to happen this year, guys, but it's got to happen. We got to start having these conversations, man. And I don't know, like, I got an unwinnable race, man. I'm a lunatic libertarian who got kicked off the ballot. It's not going to happen, right? But we got to start thinking about it, man. Who are we going to wake up? We got to wake up.
He says, convince me otherwise. Listen, man, I was scared of voting other than Republican myself. And I am glad at some point the Marine Corps got to me, right? And it was one of those things where it was a moment of faith almost, right? Like, and you know, for a lot of people out there, listen, you know, I don't quite consider myself a Christian anymore, because to question everything is to question even God's existence, right? You sit reason firmly in her seat and you question even the existence of God, because God will definitely love the fact that you're even questioning, like, with humility in your heart. You know, it's a question. It's got to be faith in God that gets you away from voting out of fear. If you're voting out of fear, you shouldn't vote. You should never vote out of fear. You should vote your conscience. You should vote principle. And you should ask yourself, what are my principles? I'll tell you, for me, one of the greatest things that I ever found was the principle of peace and liberty and free markets. Those three principles. If a person isn't supporting peace, if they're not supporting free markets, if they're not supporting liberty at an individual level, you don't have my vote. And that, for me, man, I can sleep at night. I, like, as a guy who was a Marine, you know, like, at one point in my life, I sleep super sound at night because I don't give these tyrants, these murderers, and these thieves any support for myself. I don't have to defend them. I never have to defend these cats when a Democrat comes up to me and says, hey, this guy's a warmonger, or hey, you know, these guys lock people up for fantasy crime. I don't have to defend those people. All I got to say is, hey, man, if they were for peace, liberty, and free markets, I got you. If not, hit the road, Jack.
All right, so my buddies Warren and Shelley, they use the word scary there as a nomenclature. They are scared of nothing, so that's okay. But that, sure. I think they like me. They've helped me. They obviously like you, or they wouldn't be here asking questions. And I think always I appreciate that question, because that question is a big deal, right?
It is, man.
People got to wrestle with that question.
And
Democrat, the word Democrat in there too, don't you think? I mean, we'll accept Democrats. We like them. They have ideas and solutions that are okay with us too. They just missed the boat. They think the government answers every single piece of that problem, don't they? It's like, I want to make you at the point of a gun do what I'm asking, brother. Right?
Bingo. Right? Like, hey, listen. There's a great saying: "It's good ideas don't require force." Right? Yeah. You got to point a gun at somebody to do something, you're wrong. It doesn't once you put on a badge or once you become part of the government, it doesn't make it okay to point guns at people to do things. That's one of those things that I don't think, as Americans who have been ripped apart by the war on poverty, the war on the war on drugs, the war on terrorism, the war on now a disease, right? Like, we have been ripped apart as a nation. We've had our souls ripped out by these, power hungry Democrats, these power hungry Republicans, the propaganda that feeds these people. Like, this whole thing is rigged against the individual, and they set up parameters where, if you're for LBGQ, whatever today, or against, now you're enemies. There shouldn't be a choice, right? The government shouldn't be involved in marriage. They shouldn't be involved in what you put in your body. Like, all of these things are false choices that are created. Man, I am getting absolutely crushed here on a call. I wonder if there's an emergency somewhere.
Great, man. We can wrap this up. We can thank the people that were here. Is that what's going on? You got to get going?
I've just gotten 3 calls from the same number here in my hometown, and my kids are at jiu-jitsu practice right now.
Hey,
two seconds.
Yeah.
Hello.
Great. I'll keep going. Yeah. All right. Put
Hello.
the kids on.
I think I'm getting butt dialed, brother.
All right.
Hey, let's keep. Yeah, we're good. We got time, brother. I don't want to do this.
All right. I gotta go help my wife with something. So we're kind of teetering on stuff here.
Yeah.
Brother, listen, I will do this again anytime.
Yeah.
This was a blast. I am so glad you took the time to meet my friends. And that is one of the things that the Libertarian Party, you don't get that anyplace else. You go to the Democrat Party, go to the Republican Party, they check your bank account before they accept you as a candidate, period, right?
That's true.
We're building something real for our kids and for their kids. And that's where I'm at.
Tim, hey man, it's a pleasure. I am humbled, and for you people that are out there, it is one of those things where if a man will give you something like his reputation and his platform to come on, his audience, you got to be extremely thankful. I'm blessed beyond all absolute words, and I wish you the best. I'd love to do this with you again, Tim. I mean,
all right, we'll do it.
You're a great guy, man, and I wish you the best up there. If you got any, if you guys out there got questions, you can hit me up at Shane at ShaneHazel.com. You can find out more about me at Radical. It's on every major podcasting platform. Facebook is Shane Hazel GA, and Twitter is Shane T Hazel, as in Tango. And I think that's about it, man. I'm absolutely humbled. Tim, I've really enjoyed it. Anybody that's got a Team Hoyt hat on out there, brother, a fellow bow hunter, bro, man, what do you shoot?
Carp out of my lake.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's the big. It's fun, right? It's challenging to get them. Sometimes they come up. You got to get them broadside because fish can jump and arrow, and it makes it for an interesting challenge.
Right on.
Come up and check it out sometime, man.
I'd love to, man. I love upstate New York.
From the deck, it'll be awesome. He'll come and give us a ticket, but it's all right. It's still worth it. All right, brother. I'll catch you later. Thank you very much, and man, we'll do this again for sure.
Yeah. God bless, brother. You got it anytime, man.
All right.